Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the wildly fascinating world of finance. But actually, scratch that. We're not going to be looking at complex math formulas or staring at deeply technical spreadsheets. Instead, we're going to prove that doing well with money has surprisingly little to do with how smart you are and a whole lot to do with human behavior. Okay, let's jump right in. So, I want you to start by asking yourself kind of a mind-bending question. In what other industry on earth could someone with literally no college degree, no formal training, and no background massively outperform someone with the absolute best education and connections? I mean, you would never see a humble rural janitor perform a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon, right? That's impossible. But in the world of money, this exact seemingly impossible scenario actually happened. Section 1. The psychology of money, where behavior completely trumps intelligence. You see, financial success really isn't a hard science. It's a soft skill. It's this unique arena where how you behave matters significantly more than what you know. Consider this absolutely stark contrast. On one side, we've got Ronald Reed. He was a humble gas station attendant who fixed cars for 25 years, swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years, and lived in a tiny, modest two-bedroom house. On the other side, we have Richard Viscone. He was literally everything Ronald was not. A Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, widely praised for his brilliant business savvy, who lived in an 18,000-square-foot mansion in Connecticut, complete with 2 elevators and 7 garages. The whole shebang. So how did this all shake out? Well, when Ronald Reed died in 2014 at 92 years old, he made international headlines. This humble janitor died with a staggering net worth of $8 million. And no, he didn't win the lottery. He just patiently saved what little he could and invested it in reliable, major companies for decades. Meanwhile, just months before Reed's death, our brilliant Harvard executive Richard Viscone went bankrupt. The 2008 financial crisis completely decimated his finances, which were built on massive debt, and that sprawling mansion was sold off in a foreclosure auction. Ronald Reed was patient, Richard Viscone was greedy. That's it. That is all it took to eclipse a massive education gap. And honestly, this brilliant, almost unbelievable paradox is the absolute foundation of our source material today, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. The book argues that we make a massive mistake when we treat money like physics, as if it's governed by rigid laws and strict rules. Instead, we really should be treating it like psychology, because it's driven by emotions, nuance, and everyday human behavior. Moving on to Section 2. Behavior beats financial intelligence. So why exactly does everyday human behavior so easily beat out traditional textbook financial intelligence? Why do undeniably smart people constantly make terrible financial mistakes? Well, as Voltaire so wisely put it, history never repeats itself, man always does. If you really want to understand why people bury themselves in debt or panic sell everything at the absolute bottom of a market crash, studying interest rates isn't going to help you. You have to study the agonizing history of human greed, fear, insecurity, and optimism. Ultimately, we make our biggest decisions at the dinner table, not just on spreadsheets. Which brings us to Section 3. Why no one is crazy? Now, we all know people do crazy things with their money, right? But the source material makes this really fascinating argument. No one is actually crazy. Every single financial decision a person makes perfect sense to them in that specific moment. Why? Because our unique generational timing completely shapes our worldview. For example, if you were born in 1970, the stock market increased almost tenfold during your teens and 20s. You grew up fundamentally believing the stock market is a wealth-generating machine. But if you were born in 1950, the market literally went nowhere during your young adult years. These two groups, separated purely by the random chance of their birth year, are going to go through the rest of their lives with completely different risk tolerances and core beliefs about investing. And we see the exact same thing happen with inflation. Imagine being a baby born in the 1960s. You experienced a massive threefold surge in prices during your 20s. You vividly remember gas lines and shrinking paychecks. But someone born in 1990, they've experienced such low inflation for their formative years that it likely never even crossed their mind until very recently. You simply cannot expect these two people to respond to the exact same financial information in the exact same way. This whole concept of unique worldviews, it's absolutely crucial because it helps us build empathy, even for financial decisions that seem mathematically absurd to us, like, say, buying lottery tickets. The lowest income households spend over $400 a year on lottery tickets, even though most of them couldn't afford a $400 emergency. Now, to a wealthy person, this seems totally crazy. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, You have zero prospects for higher wages, and you can't afford basic safety nets. Buying that ticket is literally the only time you get to hold a tangible dream of getting the good stuff that wealthy people just take for granted. They aren't bad at math. They're paying for a dream. We also really have to cut ourselves some slack because modern finance is just incredibly new. Before World War II, most men simply worked until they died. The modern concept of retirement, this idea where you save and invest for decades just to sit back and enjoy your golden years, is barely 2 generations old. The 401k didn't even exist until 1978. If the Roth IRA were a person, it would barely be old enough to grab a beer. We are all just newbies trying to navigate a highly emotional, incredibly complex system with very little historical experience. Let's dive into Section 4, the siblings of luck and risk. We all love to attribute success purely to hard work and failure to bad decisions, but the world is just way too complex for that. To truly understand the unseen forces dictating our financial outcomes behind the scenes, we have to look at Bill Gates and his childhood best friend Kent Evans. Bill Gates famously landed at Lakeside School in Seattle in 1968. It was one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer. Gates and his brilliant friend Kent Evans spent all their time on it, scheming about becoming CEOs together. Kent was arguably just as smart, just as driven as Bill. But while Bill Gates went on to found Microsoft and change the world, Kent Evans tragically died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school. What is truly astounding here, though, are the mathematical odds. Out of roughly 303 million high school-aged people in the world in 1968, only about 300 attended Lakeside. That is a 1 in a million stroke of luck for Bill Gates. But consider this. Every year, there are only a few dozen mountaineering deaths in the U.S. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are also roughly 1 in a million. Both of these brilliant young men experienced the exact same staggering odds, just in opposite directions. One experienced extreme, history-making luck. The other experienced devastating risk. As Gates himself so perfectly put it in this powerful quote, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose." We really have to give luck and risk their proper respect. When you're judging your own financial successes and failures, or evaluating the successes and failures of others, just remember that nothing is ever quite as good or quite as bad as it seems. And finally, Section 5, the power of enough. So, if luck and risk can basically derail even the smartest plans, how do we protect ourselves? Well, it really comes down to knowing your ultimate limit on runaway risk and understanding the absolute danger of not knowing when to stop pursuing more. Consider the completely astonishing story of Rajat Gupta. Talk about starting from nothing. He was born in a Kolkata slum and was orphaned as a teenager. Yet he brilliantly climbed his way up to become the CEO of McKinsey, literally the world's most prestigious consulting firm. He sat on the boards of 5 public companies and partnered with Bill Gates on philanthropy. By 2008, he had amassed an unfathomable fortune of $100 million. By all accounts, he had won the game of life. But $100 million just wasn't enough. Gupta sat on the board of Goldman Sachs, constantly surrounding himself with billionaires. He wanted to be in that elite billionaire circle so incredibly badly that during the 2008 financial crisis, he leaked highly confidential insider secrets to a hedge fund manager. He allegedly helped generate $17 million in illegal profits. And for what? He already had more money than he could ever possibly spend. He threw away his entire life, his legacy, and literally went to federal prison, all out of a reckless, blinding greed for just a little bit more. Now contrast Gupta's endless treadmill of greed with this really beautiful realization from the author Joseph Heller. Heller was at this lavish party thrown by a billionaire hedge fund manager. A friend leaned over and pointed out that the billionaire host had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his massively famous novel Catch-22 over its entire history. Heller simply smiled and replied, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." So, the crucial takeaway here is this. There are some assets that are so completely invaluable, they should literally never be put at risk, no matter what the potential financial upside might be. Your reputation, your personal freedom, your independence, your family, your happiness, these are priceless. When you don't have a firm sense of enough, you are eventually going to risk things you desperately need just to gain things you simply don't need. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up this explainer. Have you clearly defined your own personal enough? Or are you endlessly, mindlessly chasing that next dollar, risking your own happiness along the way? The psychology of money shows us that true wealth isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about knowing yourself, understanding your own hidden biases, respecting the incredibly powerful forces of luck and risk, and above all, knowing exactly when you have won the game. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.